A slow rain had just started to fall on Applebrook's battered livestock auction barn, and the only thing colder than the wind was the look on Emma Rowe's face as she stepped from her dusty Corolla. She paused, hands trembling, and zipped up her faded coat against the late autumn chill.
Choose hope,
This was not
Emma,
where she
even when it
imagined her
hurts.
life would be at 39,
Come on, baby.
divorced,
Just a
childless. Back in her late mother's rural hometown, a place she'd once sworn never to return. The world felt smaller now, heavy with things unsaid. Inside, the auction barn echoed with voices, some gruff, some resigned, all familiar to each other in the way only small towns could be. Emma kept her head down as she squeezed past weathered men in Carhartt jackets, each one sizing her up, whispers already trailing behind. That's June's granddaughter, the one who ran off to the city. Thought she was too good for Applebrook. She pretended not to hear. Emma wasn't here to buy anything. She told herself that over and over as she leaned against the cold wooden rail. She was here to help her Grandma June settle old bills, maybe sell some unused tack, and then leave again as soon as she could. The barn smelled of mud, fear, and something older. History, maybe. Regret. The auctioneer, a hawk-nosed man with a permanent scowl, rattled off numbers with mechanical precision. Skinny goats, dull-eyed cows, one after another. Nobody cheered. Nobody even smiled. It was just another Thursday in a town where second chances ran out fast. Then came the foal. She was barely more than a shadow in the pen, a frail chestnut with a white diamond on her forehead, shaking so badly her knees almost buckled. Her coat was patchy, tail tangled with burrs, eyes enormous and lost. The handler tugged her roughly forward, and she stumbled, drawing a sharp, collective intake of breath from the crowd. Emma felt something twist inside her. Pity, maybe, or a strange recognition she couldn't name. Next up, Lot 27, a yearling filly. No papers, no history, just a mouth to feed. The auctioneer sneered, barely masking his contempt. Do I hear $50? Silence. Even the regulars wouldn't meet his gaze. Emma glanced at the handler, then at the foal, who seemed to be searching the crowd for someone to save her. The rain hammered harder on the tin roof, drowning out her own heartbeat. $50. It was barely enough for a good pair of boots. Why bother? She tried to look away. A woman behind her, Mrs. Tully, the town gossip, leaned in. That one's cursed, they say. Her dam died birthing her. She'll never make it through winter. The men nearby chuckled. Emma turned, anger prickling. She's just a baby. She deserves a chance. Chance? Someone scoffed. You city folks think you can save everything. The auctioneer cleared his throat, impatient now. Come on, folks. She goes to the processor next if nobody wants her. $40? Emma's throat closed. Her mother's face flashed through her mind. Not the sick, withered version she'd last seen, but the wild-eyed young woman who used to sing as she brushed horses in the early morning fog. Her mother had always believed in lost causes. The foal's legs shook. Emma felt herself stepping forward, the crowd parting as if she were contagious. $50, she said, voice steadier than she felt. Gasps, whispers. Mrs. Tully hissed, You're making a mistake. But the auctioneer jumped at the sound of money. Sold. To the lady with more heart than sense. Emma stood frozen. What had she done? She didn't even have a trailer, let alone a plan. Her hands shook harder as the handler shoved a slip of paper into her palm and pushed the foal out of the pen. As she led the shivering animal out into the rain, she heard the crowd behind her. Damn fool, she'll regret this. That's a bad omen for sure. She always did have her mother's stubborn streak. Emma's grandma June was waiting by the old red pickup, face a careful mask. "You really did it, Em. Well, that takes guts." Emma managed a weak smile. "I couldn't just let her die, Grandma. I had to do something." June nodded, her eyes misty. "Your mama would have done the same, you know." They lifted the foal, Hope, Emma decided she'd call her, into the trailer June borrowed from a neighbor. As they did, a flash of lightning illuminated the town's faces pressed to the barn windows, some scowling, others curious, most just watching to see what would happen next. Emma could feel it. 1,000 old superstitions circling her name. Her choice. She glanced at Hope, who pressed her nose into Emma's hand, shivering but alive. For one brief, electric second, the world seemed to hold its breath. As they pulled away from the auction barn, June squeezed Emma's shoulder. "You just set this whole town talking. Reckon you might have started something, Em?" Emma stared out at the winding road home, rain streaking the windshield. The foal's breath was warm on her neck. She wondered if, for the first time in a long while, she'd actually done something that mattered. The ranch was nothing like Emma remembered. The driveway, once lined with wildflowers, was now choked with weeds and gravel. The old barn sagged, its red paint long faded to a stubborn pink, the roof patched with rusty tin. Grandma June's house, tucked behind a scraggly line of cottonwoods, looked smaller, more fragile than in Emma's memories. This was not just a return. It was a reckoning. The rain had let up by the time Emma and June unloaded Hope from the trailer. The foal stumbled on the uneven ground, her legs shaking with exhaustion. Emma's chest tightened. She could feel the judgment in every dark window along the road. Neighbors watching, already whispering about the fool who'd brought a cursed animal home. They led Hope into the barn, where the air was thick with dust and the ghosts of old hay. Emma found a corner stall and spread the last of the clean straw. June brought out a battered bucket, filling it with water from the pump, her hands moving slowly, as if remembering how things used to be. Hope sniffed the water, but made no move to drink. She pressed herself into the straw, shivering. "She's in worse shape than I thought," June murmured, worry lines deepening around her eyes. "Skin and bones. We'll need to keep her warm tonight, Em. The temperature's dropping." Emma nodded, anxiety prickling her scalp. She pulled her phone from her pocket, no signal, of course, and wondered if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. Still, she moved quietly through the motions, checking the foal's hooves, looking for cuts, rubbing her down with an old towel. Hope flinched at every touch, her ribs jutting out beneath her dull coat. As dusk settled, the barn's shadows grew long. June brought out 2 old horse blankets, and together, they draped them over Hope. The foal blinked, too tired even to protest. Emma brushed the tangled mane gently, untangling burrs and mud, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe here now." They left the barn door cracked, hoping the little bit of body heat would hold. June made soup in the cramped kitchen, canned tomatoes and noodles, thin but hot. Emma stared into her bowl, unable to eat. Her mind spun with worst-case scenarios. What if Hope died tonight? What if the town blamed her? What if she failed? Again? A knock at the back door startled her. June shuffled over, wiping her hands on a faded apron. On the porch stood Carrie Wilkes, the neighbor's daughter, a tiny whirlwind of freckles and curiosity, barely 9 years old. She clutched a flashlight in one hand, a worn blanket in the other. "Is the baby horse okay?" Carrie asked, eyes wide. Emma hesitated. She's trying. It's been a long day. Carrie nodded, her lips pressed together in worry. My daddy says horses are tougher than they look. I brought a blanket from my room. It smells like vanilla, though. Emma's heart softened. That's really kind of you, Carrie. June smiled, pulling Carrie inside. Come on, sweetheart. Let's go see if we can help. Back in the barn, the temperature was already plummeting. Their breath came in clouds. Hope lay curled in the straw, her body shivering with a violent intensity. Emma's panic rose. She remembered enough from childhood to know that foals could die fast, especially in cold like this. They worked together, Emma, June, and little Carrie, layering blankets over Hope, tucking them tight. June heated water on the old stove and poured it into rubber bottles, which they wedged around the foal's fragile body. Carrie stroked Hope's nose, humming softly. Emma sat beside her, rubbing Hope's neck, willing her to hold on. The barn was silent except for Hope's shallow breaths and the distant howl of wind through the rafters. Emma glanced at her grandma, who was quietly reciting prayers under her breath. She didn't believe in miracles, not anymore. But in that dark barn, surrounded by cold and fear and the faint smell of vanilla, she desperately wanted to. Hours crawled by. Carrie eventually nodded off, curled against Emma's side. June dozed on a bale of hay, wrapped in an old quilt. Emma stayed awake, listening to every rattle in Hope's chest, every shift of straw. Outside, frost crept up the barn windows, blurring the line between night and morning. At some point, Emma thought she saw movement by the door, a flicker of light, gone in an instant. She told herself it was just the wind or exhaustion, but part of her felt watched, almost guided. She squeezed Hope's ear gently. Just hang on, sweetheart. Don't give up. As dawn broke, a thin stream of pink light spilled across the barn floor. Emma realized suddenly that the shaking had stopped. Hope was breathing deeper, more steadily. She lifted her head, nuzzling Carrie's blanket with a small, uncertain sigh. Emma blinked back tears, relief flooding her. June woke, stretched, and gasped. She made it. Oh my word, she made it. Carrie stirred, rubbing her eyes. Is she okay? Emma smiled for the first time in months. She's better than okay, Carrie. She's a fighter, just like you. The three of them sat together, a strange, makeshift family, watching as the morning sun lit up the barn. Hope stood, wobbly but determined, and nickered softly, a sound that felt like hope itself. In that moment, Emma realized something had shifted, not just in the foal, but in herself. For the first time since her divorce, since her mother's death, since the world had closed in on her, she felt the faintest glimmer of warmth, not just from the rising sun, but from the people and the fragile, stubborn little horse, who refused to give up. Outside, the town was waking. There would be talk, of course. More gossip, more sideways glances, but Emma didn't care. She'd found something in the cold, dark barn that couldn't be taken away. Hope. And maybe, just maybe, a new beginning. The sky over Applebrook brightened in hesitant bands of gold, and for the first time since her return, Emma felt the pull of morning chores, not as a burden, but as a quiet promise. The barn, which had seemed so grim just days before, now echoed with small, hopeful sounds. The shuffle of Hope's hooves, the distant chirp of birds braving the frost, the soft creak of weathered boards. Emma stood in the doorway, cradling a mug of instant coffee, and watched as the foal sniffed the air, each breath a small miracle. Carrie was back before breakfast, bounding up the gravel drive with her tangled hair barely tamed by a pink headband. She carried a bag of chopped apples and carrots and waved at Emma as if they'd known each other forever. "Morning, Ms. Emma. Hope still okay?" Emma grinned. "She's more than okay. She stood up by herself this morning. Ate a little, too." Carrie tiptoed into the stall, holding out a carrot chunk. Hope sniffed at it warily, then nudged it onto the straw before giving it a tentative lick. "See?" Carrie said, face brightening. "I told you she was magic." Emma chuckled, but a shiver ran up her spine. Magic wasn't a word she used easily. It belonged to childhood, to bedtime stories, and the half-forgotten rituals her mother used to perform when the world felt too big. Still, there was something about Hope that felt almost fated. As Emma brushed Hope's mane, her fingers snagged on a tight, matted knot. She worked it loose, cursing the years of neglect, and felt something cold and hard buried deep in the tangle. Curious, she dug gently until her hand closed around a small, tarnished locket. The chain twisted around a clump of hair. Emma held it up, heart thudding. The locket was old. She recognized the faded engraving, a simple wildflower, almost worn smooth by time. She remembered it from her childhood, on the delicate neck of her mother, Sarah. Emma had searched for it for months after the fire that took their barn and so much more. She'd always assumed it had been lost forever, a memory swallowed by flames. Carrie crept closer, eyes wide. "What is it?" Emma opened the locket with trembling hands. Inside, on one side, was a tiny photo, her mother, barely 20, smiling in the golden light. On the other, a scrap of yellowed paper with a single word: Hope. Emma's knees went weak. She sat in the straw, the foal nuzzling her shoulder as if she knew what the locket meant. A lump rose in Emma's throat. Carrie slid beside her. "You okay?" Emma nodded, unable to speak. She closed the locket, tears blurring her vision. How had it ended up here, in this foal's mane? Coincidence was a word she no longer trusted. For a while, the two sat quietly, hope between them. Outside, the wind rattled the barn doors. Emma found herself thinking about all the stories her mother used to tell, about animals finding their way home, about spirit guides, about love that never really died. Carrie broke the silence. "My grandma says horses like Hope are special. She calls them spirit animals. Says sometimes they come to heal families." Emma smiled weakly. "Do you believe that?" Carrie shrugged. "I think sometimes the world tries to fix things. Maybe Hope came to help you remember your mom." The thought lingered as Emma watched the morning unfold. She remembered something her mother once said, whispered into Emma's hair after a nightmare. "The ones we love never really leave. They find ways to come back, even if we're too sad to see them." Hope nosed the locket, as if urging Emma to believe it. Later, after June finished her chores, the three of them gathered around the kitchen table. Emma told her grandmother about the locket. June's face went pale, then soft with memory. "Ah, that locket," June whispered. "Sarah wore it the night of the fire. I never found it in the ashes. I thought maybe, well, it doesn't matter what I thought. I suppose some things find their way home when they're meant to." Emma traced the engraved wildflower with her thumb. "It's like a sign, Grandma. Like Mom's telling us something." June nodded, tears in her eyes. "Your mama always said hope was the bravest thing a person could choose. Maybe this foal. Maybe she's here to remind us." Emma's skepticism faded, replaced by a sense of awe. She didn't know what she believed anymore, but she knew the old pain in her chest had eased, if only a little. Carrie, ever practical, pulled out her sketchbook and began drawing hope. She told Emma stories, some true, some invented, about horses who could sense sadness and help people heal. Emma listened, letting the child's voice fill the cracks in her own battered spirit. That evening, as dusk settled over the ranch, Emma stood in the barn and watched Hope sleep. The foal twitched, chasing some dream, her nose pressed into the warm straw. Emma touched the locket at her throat, the thin chain cool against her skin. She thought of her mother. She thought of all the lost things she'd given up on. Old dreams, old loves, even herself. And for the first time in years, she wondered if the universe wasn't done with her story yet. Outside, the stars blinked on one by one, silent witnesses to a world filled with second chances. Emma closed her eyes, and for just a moment, let herself believe in magic. The days slipped into a quiet, steady rhythm at the ranch, a pace Emma had forgotten. Each morning began with pale sunlight filtering through lace curtains and the smell of strong coffee. She'd find Grandma June already at the stove, humming old country songs and whisking eggs in a chipped blue bowl. In the barn, Hope was always waiting, her coat glossier, her eyes brighter with each passing day. The wounds of the past still lingered, but they didn't feel so raw, not in the comfort of new routines. One chilly afternoon, Emma and June sat side by side on the porch, peeling apples for a pie. The sound of their knives tapping against the bowl was the only noise for a long while. Emma glanced at her grandmother, noticing the faraway look in her eyes, the kind that seemed to belong to another time, another sorrow. "Grandma," Emma said softly, "can I ask you something?" June nodded, not looking up. "After the fire, what happened? I remember so much confusion, but no one ever talked about it." "Not really." June's hands paused, apple peels coiling in her lap. The air thickened between them. "I suppose I thought I was protecting you by not saying too much," June began. Her voice trembled. "But that's just another way of hiding, isn't it?" Emma set down her knife. The ache in her chest, familiar as breathing, tightened. "I blamed myself for a long time, Emma. For everything. Your mother was strong, but she carried so much hurt. I was too proud to see how lonely she was after your daddy died. When the fire happened, I kept thinking, if only I'd paid more attention. If only I'd been a better mother." June's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "There are things I wish I'd said. Things I wish I hadn't. Sometimes I wonder if Hope came here to force us to face it all, finally, to stop running from the past." Emma reached for her grandmother's hand, squeezing it tightly. "We can't change what happened, Grandma, but maybe we can forgive ourselves." June's lips quivered. "That's what I want, Emma. I want us both to stop hurting." A gentle wind rattled the porch swing. Emma watched the sun set over the pasture, streaking the sky in orange and gold. She felt lighter somehow, like the air had shifted around them. Later, Carrie arrived, her cheeks red from the cold and her hands clutching a basket of homemade muffins. She burst into the kitchen, chattering about school, about the horses she'd drawn in art class, about a rumor that Hope could read people's hearts. June laughed. "That might be true, honey. She sure changed ours." Carrie grinned, proud to be part of something magical. She raced outside to check on Hope, who nickered in greeting, already used to the little girl's wild energy. As autumn deepened, the trio found themselves drawn together by necessity and something deeper. There was wood to chop, fences to mend, Endless chores that once would have seemed overwhelming but now became opportunities for quiet conversation. Emma learned the rhythms of ranch life all over again. The way frost made the earth sparkle, the satisfaction of a clean stall, the joy of seeing Hope gallop clumsily across the field, her thin legs growing stronger. On a crisp Saturday morning, they all worked together to repair the barn's old doors. June directed, Carrie fetched nails and tools, and Emma hammered, her muscles aching in a satisfying way. They laughed when Carrie tried to drive a crooked nail and wound up with more paint on her jeans than the wood. When the work was done, they sat on hay bales, sipping cider. Hope poked her head over the stall door, ears twitching. You know, June mused, I never thought I'd see this place feel alive again. Not after Sarah died. Emma looked at the barn, the fields beyond, at Carrie giggling as Hope tried to nibble her sleeve. She thought about the locket, still hanging around her neck, a secret promise from the past. I think Mom would have wanted this, Emma said quietly. A home filled with laughter, with hope. They spent their evenings together now, no longer three separate souls, but a makeshift family bound by new routines and old memories. Sometimes June would share stories of Emma's mother, how she'd rescued a stray cat, or snuck out to ride horses bareback under the moon, or sung lullabies in a voice that made even the cranky rooster fall silent. Emma listened, soaking up each memory, letting it fill the empty spaces inside her. She told Carrie about her childhood adventures at the ranch, and Carrie shared stories of her own, a blend of fact and imagination, full of talking animals and secret passageways. The ranch became a sanctuary not only for Hope, but for Emma and June as well. Mornings were quiet, filled with chores done side by side, a gentle rhythm of work and rest. Evenings were for stories, shared food, and the kind of laughter that left the heart sore and happy. On clear nights, they'd gather by the pasture fence and watch the stars. June taught Carrie to identify constellations, her voice soft and sure. You know, June said one night, there's an old saying, every star is a hope that someone wished on. Emma smiled at the sky, thinking of her mother, of the locket, of the fragile foal now dozing safely in the barn. I believe it, Emma whispered. I really do. For the first time in years, forgiveness, of others, of herself, felt possible. And as the autumn leaves swirled around the ranch, Emma realized they were all beginning to heal, each in their own way, one quiet morning at a time. By the time frost crept along the fence posts and painted the fields silver, Emma's routine at the ranch had settled into something comforting, almost sacred. She and June rose before dawn, their breath clouding in the cold kitchen while the kettle whistled. Carrie would appear, bundled in layers, always eager to help with chores. Hope, once frail and uncertain, now met them at the gate, her eyes bright and curious. For a brief while, the world outside felt far away, but in small towns like Applebrook, nothing stayed private for long. Whispers spread like wildfire, winding through church pews, school hallways, and the grocery store checkout line. The story of Emma's impulsive bid at the auction and the cursed foal was told and retold, details changing with every mouth that spoke them. Emma first noticed the shift at the general store. She was picking up flour and coffee when Mrs. Tully, never subtle, leaned in close. I heard that horse of yours survived the night, she said, her voice dripping skepticism. But mark my words, nothing good comes from tempting fate. That animal's a bad omen. Emma forced a polite smile and kept moving, but the air felt heavy, eyes tracking her every move. Outside, a pair of teenage boys kicked at the gravel, snickering. Watch out, Ms. Rowe, Hope you don't catch that horse's bad luck. Emma's jaw clenched. She reminded herself that she'd faced worse: divorce, loss, heartbreak. Still, the isolation pressed in. Things grew more complicated when Carrie started coming home from school quieter than usual. She lingered in the barn after classes. Shoulders slumped. Her usual stories and laughter faded. Emma found her one afternoon sitting in the straw, legs pulled to her chest, tracing idle circles in the dust. "You okay, Carrie?" Carrie hesitated, biting her lip. "Some of the kids at school, they said Hope's a demon horse. They make fun of me. They said I believe in fairy tales." Emma knelt beside her, heart aching. "People are afraid of what they don't understand, Carrie. But that doesn't mean you should stop believing." Carrie nodded, but her eyes were damp. "Do you think Hope is cursed?" Emma shook her head. "I think hope is a miracle, even if other people can't see it yet." Word spread quickly when Doc Harris, the town's elderly veterinarian, arrived at the ranch for a checkup. The old man had seen every sort of animal in Applebrook, and his approval still carried weight. He was gruff but kind, with hands steady from decades of difficult work. He inspected Hope from muzzle to tail, listening to her heartbeat, checking her eyes and teeth. "She's a tough one," Doc Harris finally said, tipping his hat. "Seen her type before. Folks write 'em off, but with care they can surprise you." June poured him coffee in the kitchen, and the three adults talked while Carrie slipped Hope a handful of oats. Doc Harris leaned in, voice low. "You know, this town's seen hard times. People get superstitious. But I remember a man, Jim Kessler, lost everything in the flood of '85. Folks said his land was cursed. He rebuilt. Folks said it wouldn't last. But he proved 'em all wrong." Emma listened, hope flickering in her chest. "Sometimes," the old vet said, "the thing everyone fears most is just the thing that saves us." After he left, Emma felt a strange sense of resolve settle in her bones. The town's judgment would not sway her, not this time. Still, the rumors escalated. Someone left a bundle of dead sage on the ranch's gate, an old local superstition meant to ward off evil. Emma found it at dawn, brittle and gray, tied with a strip of red cloth. At the diner, two women stared openly at her and June, whispering behind their menus. When Emma walked past the hardware store, Mr. Price, who'd once taught her how to patch a tire, wouldn't meet her eyes. Even Carrie's father, usually a silent figure, stopped Emma at the fence line one evening. "Look, Ms. Rowe, I know you mean well, but Carrie's been having a rough time. My wife thinks it'd be best if she stayed away from that foal for a bit." Emma's throat tightened, but she nodded. She watched Carrie's window that night, saw the flicker of a nightlight and the shadow of her small frame, shoulders hunched in bed. The barn felt emptier without Carrie's chatter. Even Hope seemed to notice, standing at the stall door, head tilted as if searching for her missing friend. June tried to lift Emma's spirits, baking pies and humming old hymns, but the weight of the town's judgment seeped into the walls. Emma found herself doubting, wondering if she'd brought more harm than good. One evening, after a particularly bitter day, Emma lingered in the barn, running her hands along Hope's growing muscles. "I don't know what to do," she whispered into the twilight. "I wanted to save you, but maybe I made everything worse." Hope nudged her gently warm breath on Emma's cheek. The foal's presence was grounding, a reminder that every new beginning came with risk. Late that night, Emma heard footsteps crunching on gravel. She peeked through the window and saw Doc Harris returning, a small lantern in hand. He nodded to her, then walked to the barn and gently hung a horseshoe, one he'd carried since his own youth, over the doorway. "Just a little luck for you and the foal," he said. "Let people talk, Emma. Do what's right. The rest will follow, one way or another." Emma stood there, blinking in the cold night, hope at her side. The weight in her chest lifted, if only slightly. No matter how the town turned, Emma knew she wasn't alone. Not anymore. The fight was just beginning, and this time, she would not back down. Winter came early that year, sweeping into Applebrook with a vengeance. One night, as Emma finished mucking out Hope's stall, she felt the first icy needles of snow prickle her face. The wind howled through the rafters, rattling the loose boards like angry spirits. Emma shivered and pulled her jacket tighter, peering out into the darkness as white flakes tumbled from a sky as deep and cold as regret. By morning, the world was buried under a thick, unbroken blanket of snow. The roads disappeared, the fence posts vanished beneath drifts, and the ranch seemed stranded on its own small island. Emma stood at the kitchen window, mug of coffee growing cold in her hands. Carrie's house was only a quarter-mile down the lane, but the swirling snow had swallowed it whole. June joined her, eyes squinting against the winter glare. "I haven't seen a storm like this since you were a little girl, Em." Emma nodded, worry prickling at her scalp. The snow was still falling, heavy and relentless. They'd prepared, stocked the cellar, stacked firewood, filled the water troughs, but already the anxiety of isolation pressed in. The world beyond the ranch felt distant and unreachable. Hope was restless that morning, pacing her stall, snorting at the wind. Emma wrapped her in blankets and made sure her water hadn't frozen over, but when she poured out the morning feed, Hope just sniffed at it and turned away. June frowned. "She's off her food. That's not good." Emma felt panic claw at her chest. She was fine yesterday. She was running in the snow. June touched her arm, steady but grave. "Animals can go down fast in weather like this. We have to watch her close." They checked Hope every hour, but as the day dragged on, her condition worsened. The foal stood with her head low, sides heaving, refusing even the softest oats. Her coat lost its shine, eyes growing dull. Emma's hands trembled as she rubbed Hope's neck. As night fell, the wind howled louder, rattling the barn doors. The radio, their only link to the outside world, crackled with reports of power outages, stranded cars, and temperatures dropping below zero. Emma tried to call Doc Harris, but the phone line was dead. She sent a text to Carrie's father, unsure if it would even go through. In the cramped warmth of the kitchen, Emma, June, and Carrie, who had shown up that afternoon despite her parents' warnings, insisting she couldn't leave Hope, huddled around the battered table poring over old vet manuals and hand-scrawled notes. "We have to keep her warm," Emma said, her voice tight with fear. "Blankets, hot water bottles, anything we can find." Carrie nodded fiercely, eyes brimming with determination. "She just needs us, that's all." They worked through the night, taking turns running back and forth between the house and barn. Emma piled old coats and quilts onto Hope, heating bricks in the oven and wrapping them in towels to nestle beside her. June brewed pot after pot of chamomile tea, holding Hope's head and coaxing her to sip from a bottle. Outside, the blizzard screamed, turning windows into frozen veils. The power flickered, then died completely, plunging the ranch into a cold, uneasy silence broken only by the howling wind and Hope's labored breathing. Around midnight, Emma sat beside Hope, exhaustion blurring her thoughts. Carrie dozed on a hay bale, wrapped in her mother's quilt, while June paced the aisle, whispering prayers into the gloom. Emma's eyelids grew heavy. She felt herself drifting, mind tumbling through half-remembered memories, her mother's laughter, the warmth of summer sunlight, the taste of strawberries. The sound of Hope's heartbeat, faint and ragged, filled the air. In the hush, Emma dreamed. She found herself standing in the old barn, not as it was now, but as it used to be, alive with golden light and the scent of fresh hay. Her mother stood before her, smiling, whole and radiant. "Emma," her mother whispered, voice soft as a lullaby. "You're stronger than you know. Don't let fear decide for you. Choose hope, even when it hurts." Emma reached out, longing to touch her, but her mother only shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. "It's not too late, Emma. For you, for this place, for all of us. But you have to believe. You have to choose hope." Emma woke with a start, tears on her cheeks. Hope's breathing was shallow, her body shivering despite the blankets. Emma pressed her face into the foal's mane, heart pounding with desperation. "Please," she whispered, "don't give up. Not after everything we've come through." Outside, the storm finally began to ease. Dawn broke gray and thin over the ranch, light glimmering off the snow like a promise. June and Carrie, red-eyed and silent, watched as Emma spooned a little mash into Hope's mouth, willing her to eat. At first, nothing. Then Hope's tongue flicked at the food, barely tasting it, but it was enough. "She's trying, Grandma," Emma whispered, hope and terror warring in her chest. "She's still fighting." The next hours crawled by, every small improvement a victory, every setback a stab of fear. Emma barely left Hope's side. Carrie told stories, her voice shaky but determined, and June recited prayers, hands pressed together so tightly her knuckles went white. At dusk, as the sky blushed with a faint hint of sun, Hope stood on trembling legs and nuzzled Emma's shoulder. Emma sobbed with relief, arms wrapping around the foal's neck. The storm had passed, and they were still here, wounded but not defeated. And as night crept over the ranch, Emma finally understood the lesson in her dream. Hope was not a gift that arrived in moments of ease. It was a choice, a decision made in the darkness again and again. And now it was theirs to keep. The blizzard left Applebrook shivering, but it also changed something in the marrow of the town. As the sky cleared, neighbors emerged from their houses to find their world transformed. Fences buried, driveways impassable, even the church steeple draped in snow like a pale shroud. Emma stood at her kitchen window, cradling her mug, and watched as silence settled over the ranch, as thick and heavy as the drifts that barricaded the front gate. Inside, Hope rested in her stall, weak but alive. Her recovery was nothing short of a miracle. Emma and June tended her in shifts, while Carrie spent every spare moment reading stories aloud or humming old lullabies. In the dark hours before dawn, Emma found herself standing by the stall, hand pressed to Hope's warm neck, feeling the faint but steady beat of her heart. A fragile, stubborn rhythm that echoed Emma's own resolve, but trouble lingered at the edges of relief. Food was running low, firewood almost gone, and the isolation pressed in from every side. June rationed coffee and bread. Emma melted snow for water. The radio announced, in its usual monotone, that help would be slow to reach the outlying farms. Applebrook, the broadcaster intoned, would have to look after its own. One evening, as the last candle guttered in the kitchen, Carrie spoke up. Her voice was small but clear. "We can't do this alone, can we?" Emma shook her head. "No, sweetheart. Not this time." June set down her mug, hands trembling only a little. Applebrook's always been stubborn. Folks might be scared, but they're not heartless. Sometimes all they need is a reason to come together. That night, Emma made a decision. She bundled herself in layers, pulled on her boots, and trudged through thigh-deep snow to the main road. There, she dug out the mailbox and wrote a note on the back of an old feed bill. Neighbors. Hope the foal sick, supplies low, please help if you can. She pinned the note to the mailbox, then used the last of her energy to stomp a crude path back to the ranch. Back in the barn, Emma sank onto a bale of hay, exhausted. The storm outside had left her battered, but not beaten. Carrie and June curled up with Hope, whispering words of encouragement, as Emma stared out into the frozen dark, unsure if anyone would answer her call. Morning came with a faint tapping at the kitchen window. Carrie leapt from her blankets, dashing to the door, and threw it open to find a small, shivering figure standing on the porch. It was Mrs. Tully, cheeks red, arms loaded with canned soup and a loaf of homemade bread. "Thought you might need these," Mrs. Tully muttered, not meeting Emma's eyes. "Blizzard got us all scared, but no use letting a child or a horse go hungry." Emma blinked back tears. "Thank you, Mrs. Tully, really." Word spread fast. By noon, Doc Harris arrived with a battered thermos of stew and a sack of oats. Behind him came Mr. Price from the hardware store, towing a sled filled with firewood and spare batteries. Others trickled in, arms full of blankets, potatoes, even a few jars of June's own pickles, returned with sheepish smiles. At first, no one spoke much. They worked in silence, hauling supplies, stoking the wood stove, checking on Hope. Emma watched, astonished, as neighbors who'd once avoided her eyes now patted her shoulder, asked after June's health, and left little notes of encouragement wedged in the barn door. It was Carrie who broke the ice completely. As a small crowd gathered in the barn to see Hope, she stood on a milk crate and cleared her throat. "I know some people thought Hope was bad luck," she began, voice trembling. "But she isn't. She's a good horse, and she helped us remember what it means to be a family. Sometimes you have to believe in something, even when it's hard." Her words hung in the air. Someone coughed, and Mrs. Tully dabbed at her eyes. June stepped forward, voice strong. "This ranch, my family, has known loss. We all have. But I believe Hope came here for a reason. Maybe to remind us that kindness matters more than fear. That together we're stronger." A ripple of agreement spread through the barn. Old wounds, long hidden beneath years of silence and suspicion, seemed to crack open. Mr. Price, whose wife had left him years ago, told a story about a stray dog who'd once saved his son from drowning. Mrs. Tully admitted she'd never known how to say sorry for things she'd done, but she wanted to try now. Even Doc Harris, gruff as ever, squeezed Emma's hand and murmured, "It takes guts to ask for help. Not everyone has that." The work continued for hours. Neighbors dug out the driveway, chopped wood, and fixed the generator. June made soup for everyone, and Carrie played card games with the other children who'd arrived. Hope, still fragile, stood at the stall door, accepting gentle pats and whispered words. It was as if the town itself was slowly waking from a long, cold sleep. As evening fell, the ranch glowed with warmth, firelight flickering in every window, laughter rising above the clatter of pots and pans. Emma moved through the house and barn, heart full and hands busy, overwhelmed by the transformation. Later, as the last neighbor trudged home through the starlit snow, Emma stood on the porch with June and Carrie, They watched the town's lights shimmer in the darkness, a beacon of hope and forgiveness. "I didn't think we could do it," Emma whispered. "Not after everything." June slipped an arm around her shoulders. "We didn't do it alone. That's the lesson, Em." Carrie leaned against them both, Hope's old blanket draped around her shoulders. "We just needed to ask." Emma closed her eyes, breathing in the cold, clean air. The ranch had survived its hardest winter, not by shutting out the world, but by letting it in. In breaking the cycle of fear, they had begun to heal, not just themselves, but the whole town. Spring crept into Applebrook quietly that year, its arrival marked not by a fanfare of wildflowers, but by the slow, deliberate melting of snow and the gentle swelling of green in the fields. At the Rowe Ranch, the earth came alive again, muddy, uncertain, but undeniably renewed. The scars of winter remained in deep drifts at the fence line and battered branches still waiting to bud, but each day brought more bird song, and the bitter edge faded from the wind. With hope on the mend, the energy at the ranch shifted. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, as if everyone was waiting for something bigger than the turning of the season. Emma, June, and Carrie moved through their days with a new sense of purpose, tending to the animals, planting early seeds, and putting the house and barn in order. Each evening, as the sun dropped low and golden over the hills, Emma would walk out to the paddock and lean on the fence, watching Hope graze alongside the other horses, her chestnut coat shining in the new light. It was June who first suggested a gathering. "This town's got more wounds than just ours," she said over coffee one morning. "Maybe it's time to bring folks together, not for chores or emergencies, but for healing." Emma hesitated, wary of old resentments and lingering rumors, but Carrie's face lit up. "Like a real celebration? For hope? For everyone?" "Yes, darling," June replied, voice warm and steady. "For everyone." The word spread, as things do in Applebrook. A community supper at the Rowe Ranch, potluck style, everyone welcome, no judgments or grudges at the gate. It was a risky invitation, but as the day drew near, Emma noticed how neighbors began to wave more easily as they passed, and how kids lingered at the fence to watch Hope run, their laughter bright in the morning air. On the afternoon of the gathering, the ranch was a flurry of activity. Carrie and her mother strung lanterns from the porch. June baked pies, peach, apple, pecan, while Emma arranged tables under the broad oaks near the barn. By sunset, the yard was filled with neighbors, some clutching casseroles and pies, others awkwardly carrying homemade bread or a bouquet from their yard. Even Mrs. Tully arrived, her arms full of deviled eggs and her voice soft with apology. Doc Harris was there too, helping set up chairs for the elders. "Never seen this many people here since your mother's wedding?" He grinned at Emma, handing her a folding chair. As dusk deepened, June tapped her glass and called everyone to gather. The crowd circled up, hands tucked in pockets, faces open and uncertain. June spoke first, her words carrying in the hush. "Most of us have lost something, someone, these past years," she began. "We've turned on each other, and we've turned away from hope more times than I care to admit. But this little filly, she reminded us that second chances are real, that forgiveness is something we do, not just something we feel." Emma stood at her side, the locket heavy on her chest, looking out at a sea of faces, some familiar, some changed by time and hardship. Carrie stepped forward, a slip of paper in her hand, voice trembling. "I wrote a wish for hope," she announced, cheeks flushed. "But really, it's for all of us." She unfolded the paper and read, "I wish we'd remember what it feels like to be kind. even when we're scared. I wish we'd believe in miracles, even when we can't see them. And I wish that no matter what happens, we'll keep choosing hope." The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then Mrs. Tully, voice cracking, shared her own story of losing a brother to illness and pushing friends away out of pain she couldn't name. Next, Mr. Price admitted he'd let grief turn him bitter. One by one, people spoke about heartbreak, about bad choices, about holding on to guilt. They spoke of parents lost, marriages broken, children grown and gone. For every story, someone in the crowd nodded, a silent signal of understanding. Emma felt tears slide down her cheeks, not out of sadness, but from the quiet relief of finally being seen, of being part of something honest. As the moon rose, June pressed a leather-bound journal into Emma's hands. "Your mother's diary," she whispered. "It's time you had it." Emma opened the journal carefully, fingers trembling. The first page was filled with Sarah's looping script. "This ranch is for anyone who needs a place to start again. Hope is more than a name. It's the promise we keep, for each other." The crowd drifted toward the barn, lanterns swinging, drawn to the sight of Hope standing beneath the oaks, moonlight glimmering on her coat. Emma watched as neighbors, children, elders, even former rivals, gathered around, offering apples, stroking Hope's muzzle, marveling at her transformation. Carrie read her wish again, voice clear and strong beneath the stars. This time others joined in, repeating the words softly, like a promise, like a prayer. The air buzzed with a new energy, something lighter and warmer than the burdens they'd carried for so long. Laughter and music spilled into the night. Forgiveness became not just a word, but a living thing, passed from hand to hand, story to story, like the lantern light that circled the ranch. As midnight neared and the last neighbors left, Emma sat on the porch, the journal in her lap, and Hope's silhouette moving quietly in the paddock. June slipped beside her, draping a shawl over her shoulders. "Tonight felt different," Emma whispered, "like we all took a breath for the first time in years." June smiled, squeezing her hand. "That's what happens when you let go and let forgiveness in." Emma gazed out at the stars, the sound of Carrie's laughter drifting on the breeze. For the first time, she felt certain that the past, while never forgotten, no longer held her captive. The circle had broken. The ranch and the hearts within it were finally free to heal. Applebrook changed in quiet ways after the night of the gathering. There were no more whispers about curses or ill omens at the Rowe Ranch. Instead, neighbors stopped by with friendly smiles, some bringing sacks of grain, others with bundles of wildflowers or baskets of fresh eggs. Children who had once crossed the street to avoid Emma's house now waved as they biked past, sometimes even daring to ask if they could help brush Hope or feed the chickens. Emma noticed it most in herself, where she'd once woken each morning with a tightness in her chest, a dread that pressed down on her before she even left her bed. She now felt a gentle curiosity. She wanted to see what the day would bring. The fear that she'd always carried, of making the wrong choice or being judged for her mistakes, seemed less powerful in the gentle hum of renewed community. She found herself smiling at her own reflection sometimes, catching glimpses of the girl she used to be, the one who believed anything was possible. One morning, a letter arrived at the ranch, addressed in looping, unfamiliar handwriting. It was from the principal of Applebrook Elementary, an invitation for Emma to come speak at the school's spring assembly about hope, resilience, and what it means to start over. At first, Emma balked. Public speaking had never come easily, especially in a town where her every move had once been scrutinized. But Carrie begged her to do it, and June squeezed her hand at breakfast, saying, "You have a story to tell, Em? Maybe more than one." So, on a bright April morning, Emma stood in front of a room full of restless children and anxious parents. Carrie sat in the front row, clutching her sketchbook, and Doc Harris nodded encouragement from the back. The smell of chalk and old wood drifted through the air as Emma cleared her throat, her palms damp. She looked out at the faces, some familiar, some not. She thought of her mother's journal, tucked in her bag for courage, and the small silver locket around her neck. She began simply, "Some of you know me as the lady who brought home the cursed horse. Others just know me as Emma Rowe. I came back to Applebrook after a lot of hard things happened in my life. I thought I was just running away, but I think now I was running towards something I didn't even understand yet." A ripple moved through the room, teachers nodding, parents leaning forward. "I want to talk about second chances, about how sometimes what looks like a mistake, what feels like the end, is really the beginning of something new. When I bought Hope at the auction, everyone thought I was foolish. Maybe I was. But sometimes being foolish is just another way of being brave." She smiled at Carrie, who grinned back, eyes shining. Hope didn't just need a new home. She needed people to believe in her. And it turned out, so did I. There were days I wanted to give up. Days when it seemed like the cold, or the loneliness, or the voices of doubt would win. But every morning, I chose to keep going. I chose to believe things could get better, even if I couldn't see how yet. Emma paused, letting her words sink in. That's what hope is. Not pretending that everything's fine or that we never get hurt. Hope is the courage to face the past, to forgive yourself, and to give other people the chance to change too. It's letting go of the story that says you're broken, or unlovable, or cursed, and it's rewriting that story, a little bit at a time. She saw a teacher wiping her eyes, and in the back, Mrs. Tully nodding, lips pressed tight. I learned that forgiveness, both for others and for yourself, is the key to happiness. We can't heal if we keep carrying the same old pain, but when we share our stories and we let people in, we start to find our way back to ourselves. After the assembly, children crowded around to ask questions about hope, about the ranch, about Emma's mother. Some wanted to know if miracles were real, or if horses really understood people's hearts. Emma answered as honestly as she could, always circling back to the same message. Miracles aren't always big. Sometimes they're as small as a handshake, a smile, or the courage to try again. As spring deepened, Emma spent her afternoons helping Carrie and a few other children start a little garden of second chances beside the barn, a patchwork of rescued plants and seeds from neighbors' windowsills. They learned together that some things take root only after hardship, that blooms are sometimes slow, but always worth waiting for. One evening, after a long day of chores and laughter, Emma found June sitting by the porch, gazing at the fading sky. "I never thought I'd see this place so full again," June whispered, voice thick. "You brought it back, Em. You brought us all back." Emma smiled, sitting beside her. "I just followed what Mom wrote in her journal. I chose hope even when it hurt." June squeezed her hand. "That's the hardest thing, isn't it? To choose hope. Over and over." They sat in silence, fireflies winking in the dusk, hope grazing quietly nearby. Emma realized that the ranch was more than a home. It was a living reminder of what could happen when you refuse to give up, when you forgive, and when you welcome others in, flaws and all. In the quiet of that spring night, with the world humming softly around her, Emma understood what she would carry from this chapter of her life. To believe in second chances. To forgive yourself as fiercely as you forgive others. To let go of the old story and write a new one. One where hope is always possible. And to pass those lessons on for a lifetime. The summer after the hardest winter of their lives arrived softly, with warm rain and grass growing tall in the paddocks. The Rowe Ranch bloomed with a quiet energy, as if every living thing had decided to grow toward the sun, no matter how many storms had come before. Wildflowers pressed up against the fence line, bees hummed in the clover, and the mornings filled with the nickering of horses and the easy laughter of friends. Word about hope spread far beyond Applebrook. People from neighboring towns started visiting, some drawn by curiosity, others by stories of the miracle foal that had turned a town's heart. Emma welcomed them all, families with children, couples who'd lost someone, old men who just wanted to pat Hope's neck and tell stories about horses they'd loved long ago. The ranch became a quiet haven, a place where the lonely, the hurting, and the hopeful all found something to hold on to. Emma had changed too. She rose early each day, not out of habit or necessity, but out of gratitude. She learned to listen to the small, important things. A robin singing at dawn, Carrie's cheerful chatter as she watered the garden, the steady breath of hope as she dozed in the sun. Emma found herself smiling without thinking, humming as she worked, and sometimes, when she caught her own reflection in the window, she almost didn't recognize the contentment in her own eyes. Grandma June, once weighed down by regret, seemed lighter. She took to reading aloud from Sarah's journal in the evenings, her voice strong as she shared passages about love, forgiveness, and the wild courage of starting over. Neighbors who had once whispered about the curse now stopped by with peach preserves and fresh bread, staying for supper or to help mend a fence. The walls between people, between past and present, had thinned until kindness became the everyday language of the ranch. Carrie, too, had blossomed. Her drawings of hope lined the barn walls, each one brighter and bolder than the last. She made friends at school again, no longer afraid to talk about magic or miracles. In many ways, Carrie was the heart of the place, her laughter drawing people in, her unwavering belief in second chances contagious. Hope herself was transformed. The once frail foal had grown into a strong, elegant mare, her coat gleaming with health, the diamond-shaped marking on her forehead like a badge of resilience. She led the small herd, protective and proud, allowing even the shyest child to stroke her nose. When the wind blew a certain way, Emma could swear she heard the echo of her mother's voice in Hope's soft wicker, a reminder that some bonds survive even death. The ranch's mission evolved as the seasons turned. What began as a desperate act of rescue became a purpose. With June's blessing, Emma opened the ranch gates to more animals, strays, injured horses, even a pair of half-wild donkeys no one else wanted. Children who struggled at home or in school found solace brushing manes or planting seeds in the garden. Older folks brought stories, advice, and hands eager to work. Applebrook, once divided by superstition, grew together again, anchored by a place where everyone was welcome. One warm afternoon, Emma stood beneath the big oak at the edge of the pasture, watching as a new group of visitors listened to June read from Sarah's journal. Carrie and her friends played nearby, chasing each other through the grass, laughter ringing out across the fields. A woman, stranger, city-dressed but with a tired softness in her eyes, approached Emma, holding her young son's hand. I heard about your ranch, the woman said quietly. About the foal. My husband left last year. My boy, he hasn't smiled much since. I was hoping. Her voice trailed off, the hope and doubt warring on her face. Emma nodded, gentle. You're in the right place. Sometimes it's not about fixing what's broken, but about finding a way to start over. That's what we do here. One small kindness at a time. She led them to Hope, who lowered her head and stood perfectly still as the boy stroked her muzzle. The boy's eyes widened and, slowly, a shy smile broke through. Emma watched, heart swelling. The magic, she realized, was real, woven from patience, trust, and 1,000 quiet acts of compassion. As evening settled, Emma sat with June and Carrie on the porch, sipping iced tea and listening to the low hum of cicadas. The sun painted the fields gold, and for the first time in many years, Emma felt wholly at peace. Carrie snuggled against her side, voice dreamy. Emma, do you think Hope really changed the whole town? Emma considered. I think we all changed each other. Hope gave us a reason to try again, but it was everyone's choice. To be brave, to forgive, to care, even when it was hard. June smiled, her eyes shining. It's like your mother wrote, Em. True hope is a choice, made every day. Emma nodded, turning the locket in her fingers. One act of kindness can echo through generations, she whispered, almost to herself. She looked out over the fields, at the new colts chasing each other in the fading light, at the children's laughter rising in the breeze, at the barn she once thought she'd never be able to save. This was the legacy her mother had dreamed of, a place where sorrow became strength, where forgiveness bred freedom, where love didn't hide in silence but bloomed in the open air, a haven for anyone who needed it, no matter how battered, no matter how lost. As the stars blinked awake, Emma felt the promise settle in her bones, a quiet certainty that hope, once chosen, could never truly die. The ranch, the family, and the town would go on, shaped by kindness, healed by courage, and lit from within by the simple, stubborn belief that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. And so, under the wide Applebrook sky, Emma embraced her new dawn, knowing that every ending is just the start of another story, and that true hope, once shared, can heal what once seemed beyond repair.